After lunch, it's what we call, let's say in German, Schlafstunde, or other words. Our first speaker is our secretary.
In front of the camera, so there was nobody can hear you and see you.
It's the audience here. Okay. Okay, so the first speaker is Dr. Nigel Walter. I wanted to be sure that you are here. And please, all speakers, keep time. We have discussion after this session, which is quite important. Thank you.
Thank you, Gauri. So the English term is what's the English term? I can't think what the English term is. Graveyard hour. Yeah. So now in the preamble of the Faro Convention, there is a recognition of the need to put people and human values at the center of an enlarged and cross-disciplinary concept of cultural heritage, putting people at the center. There's a question in heritage always as to where are the people? Yes. Yeah. In English, we have a little nursery rhyme which goes, here's the church, here's the steeple, open the doors, and here are the people. Okay? But where are the people? Where are the people represented in conservation? I'm going to turn to my experience with working with church buildings and bring that up against the concerns of the Faro Convention. That's the purpose of this talk. Good, it's working. So firstly, briefly, the context of how churches fit in UK conservation. And there's always a distinction between the UK and England. Most of this is about England. So in England, there are about 375,000 listed buildings, quite a lot. There are approximately 16,000 church buildings, and they very roughly divide a quarter between grade 1, grade 2 star, which is the next one, grade 2 listed. Those are the protected ones, and a quarter are unlisted, modern buildings or whatever. If you look at it the other way, of all of the top grade of buildings, 45% of those are churches, because there are, roughly speaking, 8,000 medieval churches, medieval in some part, because most of these buildings have changed over time. In England, across the UK, change to church buildings that are listed are dealt with under a separate system to a parallel system to the secular system. If you have a listed house, then you have to get listed building consent through your local planning authority. If you have a listed church, you get it through a church system under this umbrella called the ecclesiastical exemption. And then thinking about the Church of England. So the Church of England is one of the denominations, types of church that enjoys that exemption. It's the biggest one. It has most of the listed buildings. And it has the most developed system, which is called the faculty system. Within the... Thank you. Within the faculty system, the system is devolved to the 42 dioceses. So each diocese has bishop or two, and they have diocesan advisory committees. There are the same bodies that would be consulted if you had an application for your listed house also need to be consulted, and I'll come on to those. Those include the amenity societies. There's a thing called the Church Buildings Council, and the system is very legal in structure. There's a parallel system of law, ecclesiastical law, and it's administered by a specialist in that. And the equivalent of an act of parliament is the measure. So this is the law under which this system works, has this general duty. This is like a sort of headline duty. Any person carrying out functions of care and conservation under this measure, i.e. the experts, must have due regard to the role of a church as a local centre of worship and mission. So already baked into the system is a requirement for the experts to pay attention to something that is not conventional history of art-based conservation expertise. Important principle. This is a church in Derbyshire. It's called the Church of St. Alkmund in Duffield. The reason this is a barely known church, but a very famous name, because a case here just over 10 years ago produced a framework within which current decision-making takes place. And it's called the Duffield Framework, or the Duffield Questions. And the judge who makes the decision as to whether permission is granted for change needs to consider 5 questions. Firstly, is there harm to the significance of the building? That's a very low threshold. Any project for change, any change, it passes that test. There's then, moving on, if there is harm, then how serious is the harm? And against the harm, what's the justification? And then the job of the judge is to weigh those 2 things up. Particularly, it's public benefit against the harm. So again, public benefit is in the system, and indeed is also in the secular system. Those are terms that are borrowed from the secular system. What's happened? Okay. And importantly, this judgment, which is often referred to, makes clear that public benefit includes things like liturgical freedom, pastoral well-being, opportunities for mission, and indeed using the church for other things that are not inconsistent with its use as a church. So you can have a cafe in a church. And it's on the basis of being able to do those things that many of these buildings are able to survive. It'll come, I think. The beauty of this system is that all of the judgments are recorded and you can go and find them, and it's a fantastic research base. This is the church. Just in terms of the case in question, it was the screen that you can see on the left-hand arch is a Victorian piece of work, beautiful. It was in the chancel arch, which is the arch on the right. The case was about whether or not they could move it there. They succeeded, so it got moved. So that was the nature of the case. Now, churches have always been in Britain contested places, at least for the last 150 years. So this is William Morris, who set up the Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings. And his manifesto, which is well worth reading, it's just 1,000 words, very easy, is all about protection on behalf, it's keeping the fabric in place, it's staving off decay with daily repair. Some really good things in there, but there is nothing about the people of the parish. And indeed, the suggestion in there is if it doesn't work anymore, the church community should go somewhere else. I don't think that's a very good idea, but that's in there. Yes, here we go. If the building has become inconvenient for present use, then you should raise another building instead of altering the existing one. And that these buildings are monuments of bygone art. They're fundamentally art historical. And I think that the Faro Convention would disagree. They're not fundamentally art historical. This is the poet Hardy, Thomas Hardy, who was an architect before he got ill and then started writing. He was an architect. So there are 2 or 3 Hardy schemes in Dorset. And in 1906, he wrote this essay, Memories of Church Restoration, and this great quote, "To the incumbent," which means the vicar, the priest, "the church is a workshop. To the antiquary," so the expert, we could say, "it's a relic. To the parish," the people, "it's a utility. To the outsider," the visitor, the tourist, "it's a luxury." How on earth to unite these incompatibles? So it's a contested thing between these different interests. He goes on in the same essay to say much the same as Morris had said, if the ruinous church could be enclosed in a crystal palace, literally put in a museum box, and a new church be built alongside for services, the method would be an ideal one. Not so. That would not be ideal. That is a destruction of heritage. And I think the Faro Convention would agree. Okay, so in terms of the conservation landscape, how does all this work? We have a whole load of experts in the conservation landscape. We have these amenity societies, of which 4 of them are period-based, SPAB dealing with everything before 1700, and we have a 20th century society. We then have 2 others, Historic Buildings and Places, Council of British Archaeology. Then we have Historic England and the Church Buildings Council. So 8 groups who could potentially all have an input into a particular proposal for change. Unlikely. Usually it's 1 or 2 of the ones on the right, and sometimes the 2 at the top. This is Laura Jane Smith. The definition of heritage as finite and non-renewable excludes both the links of heritage to the present and ultimately to people. In the emphasis on materiality, people are forgotten or relegated to audiences of expert practice and interpretation. You don't have to agree with her, but this was delivered in Brazil at the end of last year. And then back to the Faro Convention, and that quote again, recognizing the need to put people and human values at the center of an enlarged concept of cultural heritage. So where are the people? And part of my work is to try and encourage the people, what Juanes Pulios was describing as the core community, the people of the parish, if you like, to frame them as experts, because they know their patch, their piece of territory within England better than any of the other experts. So there is a form of expertise there, which is, generally speaking, ignored by these others. So needs to be promoted, in my view. So where is the heritage? I would say that the heritage is a nexus. It's a binding together of people and place. It's in the joining together of those things, a little bit like with, here's the church, here's the steeple. It's a binding together. And anything that weakens that binding together, anything that serves to detach the people from its place, then that is bad for heritage. That's destroying heritage. That's my view. Here's a brief example. This is a grade 1 listed medieval parish church in Ely. And we were responsible for a whole series of changes. This is, as it was before, very typical arrangement of 19th century pews all the way through. So you could only use the building basically for a couple of hours on a Sunday. It was only for one purpose. We took out the floor, put in underfloor heating, put in air source heat pumps. We discovered some underground burials, intramural burials. And here are some of the people of the parish from the 18th century. We didn't break into this tomb. It had been broken into by the Victorians, so we just were having a look. And there it is back in use, and with a whole lot more people, and used 7 days a week. And in my view, yes, there has been quite significant change, but it has not been destructive change. It has moved the narrative forward, and this is a building that will survive in the long term because it will be used. That's the key test. Is it going to be used? Yes, then it will likely survive. Here's a piece of research. One of the many other things that I do. I'm a trustee of this charity, the National Churches Trust. And the National Churches Trust commissioned this research to try and determine the economic and social value of church buildings to the UK. So this is about well-being. And it's a crazy thing to do. How do you put a price on something like church, the activities of a church? Crazy, right? But it's something that we, at least in Britain, need to do because that's the language that government speaks. And they have a methodology for this. It's called the Green Book. And so adopting the Green Book, there are something like 40,000 churches across the UK as a whole, all different types of churches. And the research came out with a value for that of £55 billion a year. So maybe 65,000 euros, something like that, each and every year that churches contribute to the British economy. That's 5% of all government spending. It's twice as much as Britain spends on adult social care. It's a huge amount. Most of that, 2/3 of that is, so at least 3/4 lies in social stuff that happens associated with churches. So food banks, drug and alcohol support, mental health counselling, youth groups. Those were the functions that were looked at. And the biggest one of those is the food banks, interestingly, which is a complete disgrace, frankly, for Britain, that we need food banks, but we do. Just closing, Jelko referred to this document, Heritage and Beyond, from 2009. I want to quote from the preface, from Robert Palmer's preface to this. Heritage is not simply about the past. It is vitally about the present and the future. A heritage that is disjoined from ongoing life has limited value. Heritage involves continual creation, and transformation. We can make heritage by adding new ideas to old ideas. Heritage is never merely something to be conserved or protected, but rather to be modified and enhanced. Heritage atrophies in the absence of public involvement and public support. This is why heritage processes must move beyond the preoccupations of the experts. The Faro Convention is really challenging for us as conservation experts. I don't think we've begun to assess that challenge, but it's a really important challenge to face in my view. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We go to our second speaker, but Nigel, I must tell you something. Working years ago in Malta and going into the co-cathedral in Valletta, I could not understand how people are allowed to walk on this work of art of the floor, but it's a church. So what you do is kind of, well, now Olenka Pevny and Martha Holder, UK, second, I assume it will be one speaker, not both.
I will speak and my colleague will answer the questions.
Okay. No time for questions.
Well, when they come.
Okay.
Sorry, I just had a spicy pizza lunch, so.
Move forward and move back.
Okay. Thank you. Hang on, I have to, I'm blind. Where is back? Which one is back? Here.
This one, forward and back.
I have to get back to the first slide. Sorry, you're seeing the whole presentation, which is. How do I get to the, yes.
No, it's just on.
Okay.
Okay, stop.
So I would like to thank the organizers very much for organizing this event. And we've already had the pleasure of meeting many nice people. And I hope to meet more of you as the days go on, or one more day. And my talk is a little bit different. It is about the people. And it is about preservation and conservation in the context of war. When you don't have all these wonderful structures that Nigel just outlined, when you don't have money, how do you preserve heritage and culture? So I would like to dedicate this talk to the people of Ukraine who are fighting to maintain their heritage and culture, even as we speak today. Okay. My colleague, Marta Yarosevich-Holder, who is seated back there, and I, Olenka Pevny, are here as members of the board of directors of the US-based Foundation to Preserve Ukraine's Sacral Arts. Our president, Christina Lev in English, along with our Ukrainian colleagues, Natalia Filevich and Vasil Petrik, from the Lviv-based Center to Rescue Ukraine's Cultural Heritage, have collaborated to prepare this presentation. It outlines some of the work the Foundation is doing to preserve Ukraine's sacral heritage and to support communities affected by the hardships of war. Since 2016, the Foundation has undertaken 18 projects in Ukraine, focusing primarily on the preservation of wooden churches in the Carpathian Mountains of Western Ukraine. These churches are not only architectural and artistic monuments, but also embody long-standing traditions of faith, identity, and environmental awareness, deeply rooted in the region's unique geography. In the heart of the Foundation's work is collaborative engagement with communities, conservationists, preservationists, and architects. The Foundation aims to educate, support, and empower people through their bond with the immediate cultural environment that defines the place that they call home. Embracing the idea that monuments have a biography shared with the community and can exercise agency, the Foundation has adopted the practice of heritage recovery during times of war. We view wartime restorative efforts as a way to foster a sense of belonging, purpose, and hope, encouraging active participation in the preservation and creation of community and identity during a period of very difficult circumstances. This process is a process of cathartic practice that helps counter the feeling of helplessness and loss brought about by war. It is impossible to document the full extent of the destruction brought by the war, particularly in the active military zones in eastern and southern Ukraine. However, according to the State Service of Ukraine for Ethic Affairs and Freedom of Consciousness and the Workshop for Academic Study of Religion, from the 24th of February 2022 to the 26th of January 2023, at least 307 religious sites in 15 regions of Ukraine were fully or partially ruined by aggressive attack. By aggressive attacks of the Russian Federation, including churches, and these religious monuments included churches, mosques, synagogues, and as well as educational and administrative buildings of religious communities. By early 2024, the number had grown to 630 religious sites. As of February 2025, UNESCO, in which Russia is a member state, has verified damage to 485 sites, 149 religious sites, 249 buildings of historical and artistic interests, 33 museums, 33 monuments, 18 libraries, 1 archive, and 2 archaeological sites. Ukraine has a long history of ecclesiastical foundations, the oldest being the 11th century Cathedral of St. Sophia in Kiev. This princely foundation served as the primary sanctuary of medieval Rus lands and sought to capture the grandeur of Constantinople's, now Istanbul's, 6th century Hagia Sophia, using the architectural and artistic styles of the 12th century. During the medieval period of its construction, Eastern Christianity in Byzantium had embraced the veneration of icons, and the interior walls of Kiev's St. Sophia are richly adorned with frescoes and mosaics. Entering an Eastern Orthodox church is akin to stepping into an all-encompassing icon. While the Cathedral of St. Sophia is Kiev's oldest surviving church, it was not the city's first ecclesiastical structure. Wooden churches are recorded in Kiev as early as the mid-10th century, as illustrated by this modern reconstruction drawing of the medieval city. The earliest surviving wooden churches in Ukraine date to the 15th and 16th centuries. Early modern travelers to Ukraine recorded the widespread presence of wooden churches across the country. Often these churches were built alongside the crumbling foundations of medieval masonry churches, as seen in this view of Kaniv, a city that's 15 miles south of Kiev. And I think I have to do The illustrations of these travelers also highlighted the diversity of religious communities and the various forms of wooden churches that shape the cultural landscape of Ukraine. In this drawing, Eastern Rite and Latin Rite churches can be seen marking the hills and valleys of the central Ukrainian town of Bohuslav. The Church of St. George in Drohobych is one of the 16 churches that make up the World Heritage Site known as the Wooden Churches of the Carpathian region in Poland and Ukraine. 8 of these churches are in Ukraine. They are built on a tripartite plan surmounted by quadrilateral and octagonal domes and cupolas, and are distinguished by their polychromy interior iconography. The UNESCO listed churches represent only a small fraction of Ukraine's historical wooden architecture. So these are the 8 churches in Ukraine. And this slide shows the 2,800 churches, wooden architecture churches, surveyed in Ukraine of historical importance. So it depends who does the survey, right, as to what historical importance is. As expected, these wooden churches exhibit a variety of forms that correspond to local or regional construction methods and reflect the specific geographical features and cultural characteristics of their surroundings. Monuments of the flat steplands of central Ukraine tend to be multipartite, often painted on the exterior, and stand out in the landscape due to their verticality. In contrast, the tripartite churches of the Carpathian Mountains blend seamlessly into their forested environment. The Foundation to Preserve Ukraine's Sacral Arts is a public charity based in Washington, D.C., with a mission to educate local communities and train craftsmen in the preservation of Ukrainian churches and sacral arts. Since March 2nd, 2022, the foundation has partnered with the Lviv-based Center to Rescue Ukrainian Cultural Heritage. With the help of small donations from supporters across the United States, the foundation has funded 12 restoration projects in Ukraine. These projects have ranged from supporting ongoing restoration efforts to providing fire extinguishers and assisting the construction and painting of churches by war veterans. In most cases, the projects were initiated and carried out by local communities with oversight from Ukrainian preservationists and restoration experts. An early project undertaken by the foundation was the effort to memorialize a place of destruction and loss. In 1951, as a result of the redrawing of the border between Poland and the Soviet Union, over 32,000 people were forcibly resettled and their villages were destroyed. In the village of Smilnitsa, now Terlo, the Ukrainian Catholic Church was dismantled for building materials, and the local cemetery was abandoned. Ukrainian border guards, in collaboration with the Ukrainian Catholic University, identified the site of the church and cemetery. Funding from the foundation supported the Terla community and the Ukrainian Catholic University in clearing the site and establishing a memorial plaque. In July 2022, following the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the foundation participated with the World Monuments Fund, ICOMOS, and the Center to Rescue Ukraine's Cultural Heritage in a joint effort to deliver 440 water mist fire extinguishers to protect Ukraine's historical wooden churches, including those on the UNESCO list. Interested in supporting traditional building methods and craftsmanship, the foundation has participated in several projects involving the production an application of wooden shingles known as guante, which are commonly used to cover the roofs and walls of the wooden churches and bell towers in the Carpathian region. In the past year, the foundation, in partnership with the Lviv-based Center to Rescue Ukraine's Cultural Heritage, came to the aid of the Church of the Epiphany in the village of Kuhayev, which is listed on Ukraine's National Registry of Architectural Monuments. Built of wood in the Boyko style in 1693, the church was accompanied by a 17th century bell tower. After years of disrepair and rain, the church was in poor condition, and when the restoration work was started by the Lviv regional government, it was stopped due to the war, the costs associated with the war. So the foundation stepped in and awarded a grant to the Lviv Restoration, the firm that was leading the project, to erect a protective covering over the church until restoration work can resume. In the case of the wooden church in the village of Zhirivka, a structure dating back to the 1770s, the village community raised funds to restore the church building. The foundation provided funding for the renovation of the bell tower. In the village of Stronyatyn, a grant from the foundation covered the materials needed to restore the church facades, lower metal roofs, and bell tower. 12 men from the village volunteered their labor to complete the restoration work at no cost. Recognizing the importance of interior iconography in Eastern Rite wooden churches, the foundation supported the reinforcement of the walls and the commencement of restoration work on the Church of St. Michael the Archangel in the village of Knyatyn in 2022. The discovery of 18th century murals in the rapidly deteriorating church prompted its registration as a monument of local significance. In this case, local funding, originally allocated for the monument's restoration by the Lviv regional government, was also redirected to the war efforts. The foundation also contributed to the preservation of a unique ensemble of architecture and iconography in the wooden church in the village of Polyane. The church, designed in 1902 by the renowned Ukrainian architect Vasyl Nahirny, features interior wall painting by Modest Sosenko, a leading artist of the Neo-Byzantine style. The foundation funds were used to reinforce the church domes, protecting the wall paintings from further damage. I would like to conclude this presentation by highlighting a project that stands out in the repertoire of work supported by the Foundation to Preserve Ukraine's Sacral Arts. This project reflects our firm recognition that monuments and places have a biography intimately shared with their community. In the city of Vinnytsia, the foundation is contributing to the completion of wall paintings in the newly built church of St. George the Victorious, located on the grounds of the Ukrainian National Guard base. Commanders and soldiers of the National Guard, benefactors, and local community members all participated in the construction of the church. The iconographic program of the church's interior is being painted by 4 soldiers, 3 men and 1 woman, all of whom saw combat and have been wounded. The foundation is funding the purchase of art supplies and materials to bring the project to completion. In contemporary Ukraine, the collective effort to preserve cultural heritage amidst the devastation of war creates new memories, reaffirms a sense of belonging, and fosters hope for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. The question without answer. Do you leave at least one church damaged to show what the war was doing?
I think there are 2,800.
Okay. Thanks. Next speaker, it will be a virtual presentation by our colleague Gauri Dixit from India.
Hello.
Gauri, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
but we can't hear you.
We see your presentation.
You can't hear me, right? No.
I cannot present her paper.
Hello.
Show the slides and I will tell.
Hello.
Yes. What's the topic? Culture and architectural significance in heritage. Yes. It's a general topic, so I can can talk about it.
Hello. Hello.
Move away.
I don't know. Hello.
Sorry, but still we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me, right?
It's because of the distance.
Hello.
Just a few seconds. Try to talk.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
No, still nothing.
No, she's silenced. No.
I
Audio is
think
fine.
others
No,
can
the
hear me.
audio is fine, but
Can you read lips?
So maybe we could check connections for tomorrow, yes. In order to.
We don't hear you. Can you hide the volume?
no, we don't hear anything.
Metti alto. È basso.
Chi l'ha abbassato?
Io. More.
What should I do?
Try to talk.
Hello. I think the people on the meeting can hear me.
Yeah. Okay, now share your presentation.
All right. I hope it's visible. Yeah. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Gauri Dixit, and I'm a student of Masters in Urban Planning from Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur in India. And this topic is part of my thesis, which is part of my post-graduation. And for my thesis, I have been working on a site which is Ocha in Madhya Pradesh, India, and this presentation is what I have worked on. So, about a brief introduction, built heritage sites are often valued differently by various stakeholders, making it very difficult for effective conservation. So, the site which I have chosen, Orcha, it has been a very important strategically and geographically location, and it was a capital of Bundelkhand, which was Bundela dynasty, one of the Rajput rulers in India. This town is important in terms of built heritage, the temples, the gardens, which illustrates the Bundela architecture and town planning principles. And it has a distinctive blend of Rajput and Mughal architectural styles. And recently, Ocha has been added in the tentative list of UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and it has been chosen as a site to apply historic urban landscape approach for conservation. And that's why this site has been chosen to understand how there is a disparity between the perceptions of heritage and the conservation. So the aim of this project was to assess and reconcile stakeholder priorities and to understand it in a quantitative way. I have tried to quantify the needs and the importance of various significances by different stakeholders using the asymmetric importance performance analysis. And the objectives were to identify these different priorities by different stakeholders and to understand the gaps between the perceived importance and the actual importance of heritage conservation efforts, and ultimately to propose an actionable recommendations for sustainable heritage management. So a brief evolution of site, and here we can see that it started in 1501 with Rudra Pratap, which was the first Bundel ruler which came to Orcha, and how the site have been evolving till now. The circle one, which is 1592, which was when the temple, the Rajaram temple, came to Orcha, and this is the most important and most significant built heritage considered by the local population. So about a brief understanding, this site have derived its name from Ondo Che, which means a lower hidden. So it was a plateau which is encompassed by mountains and river on one side, and it is a small area around 6.1 square kilometer and contains around 16,000 people as per Census of India 2011. And here we can see how this area is surrounded by conserved forest as well as river and the mountains, and it makes this place a really important place to be conserved. The river itself has its mythological importance from coming from the Hindu mythology as a powerful river, which have been which have been praised by various devotees overall. And there is a wildlife sanctuary which was established in 1994. So this is the historic core of Orcha, which contains almost 174 and more protected monuments, which and the monuments which have been calculated by state protection, like the Directorate of Heritage Conservation of Madhya Pradesh, there are only 52, whereas the Archaeological Survey of India, which is the national government organization, they have yet not considered any of the monuments to be significant enough for a national importance. And there is a list of all the built heritage and all the monuments which are present on the site, and the highlighted one, which is the Ram Raja Mandir. This is the only monument which has attracted the attention of local population, considering its religious importance. Here you can see the temple is part of the historic core, which is surrounded by this commercial area that came up later, along with the hotels and other recreational activities, which have been slowly filling the gap area and the vacant land surrounding the heritage and monuments, and it has become a really big problem for the upcoming conservation efforts. This is the Ramlok, a site which have been identified by State Tourism Board, and right now they are trying to build they are trying to apply the historic urban landscape approach to connect this temple along with the various monuments that are present on the site to create a big precinct which can be utilized by further tourists. To give an idea of all the condition of all the built heritage, I'll start from the Topchika Mahal, which was the palace of the guard, as it translates. It was built around 17th century, and this is the current condition in which it is. The gates through which the the army enters the place, the army enters this walled city. This is the condition of these gates, and right now it sits on the national highway, and it's very difficult to maintain the two-way traffic through this road, and that's why it is being neglected by government in terms of conservation. Here you can see this is a snippet from 2010, and this gateway also shows the structures which were there existing. Right now, there is only this small wall which has remained, and everything have been demolished or have 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 been not conserved. I should say that in the traditional vernacular, structures are not there anymore. This was one of the mutt, which is the place where the monks used to stay, and now this place has been used by small schools to teach students from nursery before they actually enter the KG and KG2 schools. This is the Hardol Mahal, which is a sacred landscape, and it's visited by pilgrims throughout the year. And this is the garden and the condition of garden and how it has been maintained. This is another place which is known as Palki Mahal and the Savan Bhadro pillars. And these pillars, sorry, yeah, and these pillars have been used for cooling the air for the basement, which was under this structure. And right now, it is in despair. Now comes the temple, which is the Ram Raja temple, and you can see the glory of this temple and how it has been conserved by the local people, by the local stakeholders, and it sees a domestic and international tourists around 650,000 throughout a year. The daily number of visitors also ranges from 1,500 to 3,000, and during the some of the important Hindu festivals like Makar Sankranti, Vasant Panchami, this site is on its full glory. This is another important monument from historic and archaeological point of view, which is the Chaturbhuj temple, and this is one of the monument which was considered by UNESCO to added in the tentative list of World Heritage Sites. And this is it is adjacent to the Ram Raja temple, and you can see the condition of how it has been conserved compared to the Ram Raja temple. I have further slides to show this comparison, and this continues. These are the other built structures which and the condition in which they are, and yeah, so these are the other ghats and how the other places in Orcha are currently. There are galleries which depicts the story from Ramayana and Srimad Bhagavad Gita, which are the mythological and really important scriptures. And the stories are depicted through the Bundela School of Art style paintings on the wall. Now, considering the conservation experts' point of view, the outstanding universal value and the dossier which have been published by UNESCO, it talks about the Orcha's monuments, gardens, temples, murals, as well as the town planning principles which have been used as the important and uh, as the universal as the outstanding universal value of the site, which which contains temple as one of the reason. Whereas if we talk about the local community's perception on Orcha, they have given the significance importance to the temple only. And this data was collected through household survey, through citizen perception survey of local residents living in and around the site, to understand their understanding of heritage and its significance, how important the built heritage of Orcha is for people who are staying there. And there is a stark difference in the way local people interact with the built heritage of architectural importance compared to the temples with sacred or religious importance. And the average daily footfall in both of them have significantly different, which we can see. The temple attracts pilgrims, boosting the demand for accommodation, transport, and markets, selling religious goods. Additionally, the temple have driven urban development in the city, and this is the new construction which is coming up, which are the hotels. And we can see that many of this new construction lies in the regulated or the prohibited zone surrounding the built heritage, and these are filling up the urban pockets, and it will start affecting the visual integrity, the skyline, and it will start to compete with the historic landscape. So to understand how we as conservation experts interfere in this whole scenario, and for this I thought that this, as per my understanding, I feel historic urban landscape approach could be a really good way to understand the perception of local people and somehow try to incorporate that while while taking while also considering the problems of urban development as well as the conservation of built heritage. And the layers of history which Orcha consists. It starts with the natural heritage, the forest valley, the gardens, the archaeological heritage, the cultural heritage, along with the people and whose heritage it is. And this framework was utilized to consider the stakeholders consultation for conservation aims, the mapping of cities, local cultural and natural resources, and to establish and these literature review and reading throughout what characteristics are important for a historic urban landscape. It could be physical characteristics, it could be environmental characteristics, or it could be characteristics of HUL. So based on this, so based on these three dimensions were identified, and these 10 attributes were taken to understand the people's perception about the urban landscape of Orcha. And the data was collected for all these 10 attributes and through performing the AIPA and the asymmetric importance performance. So these 10 factors were considered, and after 4 rounds of testing, the less significant attributes were removed, and we tried to understand the interaction of how important people consider these factors for the urban landscape of Orcha and how these factors are performing. So, for example, if we talk about the visual integrity, so how important visual integrity for people who are living there, who are staying there, while they think about Orcha as a historic urban landscape. So, how important it is and how it is performing, and based on this analysis, we identified that open space comes as a crucial factor in urban planning, whereas there is a balanced impact of nativeness and familiarity about the site. So, it does not significantly reduce the satisfaction, nor does it significantly improve it. And visual integrity really matters. How the skyline, how the visual integrity of the overall town is maintained, it is really important. The functionality of heritage monuments, there right now they are not being utilized in any other way. There is no less or really no heritage interpretation for people to understand how these monuments were constructed, what was the history of these monuments. And this is the identified gaps after the study, and the biggest gap was in the heritage interpretation. There is little to no heritage interpretation. There is lack of understanding in younger generation. They only know about the history of temple, they only know about the history of their religion, but they really don't know about the history of other 176 monuments which are standing in on the site. There are other problems related to community engagement, how the built environment is slowly uh, hunted by these hotels and the new construction, which will slowly impact the visual integrity. The natural landscape, on the other hand, which is the wildlife sanctuary, is not yet linked in the tourism circuit, and it's right now it's being treated separately. There is no public transport available for tourists who are living nearby to come and visit the site. And the outcomes of this analysis, there is a need to prioritize open space and visual appeal. There is need to improve functionality and maintenance, and there is a need to reevaluate historic meaning and its role. So, what could be the way forward towards a convergence? So, based on the historic urban landscape approach, these three domains I have tried to answer in the community engagement tools. There should be a consensus building with stakeholders, including government and residents. There should be more community participation and awareness campaigns for the people who are living there to understand, to build understanding about the urban landscape of Orcha. There should be more storytelling and guided tours, engaging the younger generation, engaging the locals and tourists in heritage walks. There should be local community consultation in identifying gaps. I have tried to do it to certain extent, but there should be more consultation with with local community to identify the gaps in development as well as in conservation, and to involve local artisans, historians, and students in preservation activities. In terms of knowledge and planning tools, there is a need to educate visitors on how the monuments are integral to the religious and historic identity of site. There could be an action area plan for temple and the heritage zones in the core of Orcha, so that all of them are treated equally and all of them get the respect which they deserve. There should be education programs for young school kids to make them aware of their heritage. There could be technology integration in heritage interpretation, AR, VR experiences or interactive apps to share the details about the monuments and the built heritage. Part of regulatory tools, the heritage protection to be ensured through regulatory measures. Right now, as we can see, the new hotels popping up within the buffer zone because there is no heritage protection act which is trying to preserve this, which is trying to prevent this. I should say that there should be a defined protected zones around the heritage site to prevent this encroachment, what I already mentioned, and to prevent the unauthorized construction and commercial exploitation. So right now, the whole town revolves around this temple economy and all these small kiosks popping up in or around the built monuments, and it attracts more. It attracts the tourist. Along with that, it attracts the local traffic. It attracts other things which is harmful for monuments, as right now they are not being protected. There could be facade control regulations to bring back the architectural glory of the city, which right now is not there. Like while we, while I was planning to visit the site, I thought that since it is a small town and it's not being engulfed by the this modern construction and all this modern uh, architecture coming in, to that site. But when I visited there, I could not find a single house which is still having the old architectural styles, because all of them are trying to improve their housing to some extent, or else they are trying to make their structures strong enough so that they can be converted into hotels or some sort of accommodation space to cater to the religious tourists which would be coming to the site. So there is a need to bring back that glory, to bring back that understanding, to bring back some sort of efforts from the community, so as this heritage is really their heritage. We can try to uh, put our efforts in raising this understanding, but after all, they are the people who have to take it forward from here. So yeah, that's it from my side, and thank you. Yeah. Can you hear me?
There's another speaker, the fourth one, who is not here and not going to present. So our last speaker, Jinze, Belgium, China. Please.
See the speakers mode. Speaker mode? Yeah, what do you mean exactly? When we play the PowerPoint, and then there's a speakers mode where I can see the notes. Yes, yes, perfect. That's what we can see. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Happy to see you again. My name is Jinze Cui. It's a bit confusing.
Sorry, wait a second. It didn't take the shares of the screen. I don't know why, but every time is this way. Let's try. Yeah.
Remove the bar on the code because I have lots of information. Is doable.
Just a second, that the mouse will maybe answer to the command.
It's gone. It's gone.
Gone.
It looks
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much. All right. So yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jinze Cui. I'm from China. It's a little bit confusing because on the booklet on the flyer it says I'm from Belgium. I live in Belgium, but I'm originally from China. Okay. And first of all, I would like to thank the committee for accepting my paper again. So I'm really honored to stand on the floor here again to present something rather simple this time. It was something small that I personally myself have done over 10 years ago in Beijing. So the title of my presentation is called Everyone Can Define Heritage with a big question mark. And then the interim measures for the management of cultural relics, identification and its implementation or application in Beijing. I will explain what that is. That is actually the name of a law. In other words, so I'm going to talk about the possibility of so-called citizen or bottom-up heritization process in China. Can a citizen alone tell the government that I want this building, even though it's not mine, to be protected or listed? Something like that, citizen heritage and identification. So first of all, starting from the Faro Convention, even though it's a framework for the Council of Europe, as we have already learned from the previous speakers, but still it has lots of universal spirits in it. And then I particularly chose some parts in it. For example, in the preamble, it says that the Council of Europe recognized that every person has a right to engage with the cultural heritage of their own choice. They can choose what they think that can be turned into heritage, and they have a right to engage with that. And the Council of Europe is also convinced of the need to involve everyone. I particularly use this word in my title as well, in the society, in the ongoing process of defining and managing cultural heritage. And therefore, in Article 12, we can see a more detailed explanation about these two guiding spirits. It says that access to cultural heritage and democratic participation. And then number 8, we would like to encourage everyone to participate in the process of identification, study, interpretation, protection, conservation, and presentation of the cultural heritage, where Shirley has also quoted this line. And then there's also something about the public reflection and debate about the opportunities and challenges with the heritage represents. And then take into consideration the value attached by each heritage community to the cultural heritage with which it identifies. So these are the guiding spirits. Even though the Faro Convention is something from the Council of Europe, and of course, obviously, China is not part of the Council of Europe, but nevertheless, in China, roughly at the same period of time, in 2009, there was a very interesting executive order being published, which is something that I already quoted in my title, that is called Interim Measures for the Management of Cultural Relics Identification. And the general idea of this is almost exactly the same as what we have seen from the Faro Convention, which means everyone, every citizen in the society, no matter how many of you, or no matter which religious group or kind of ideology that you belong to, as long as you're a Chinese citizen, you have the right to designate a heritage, apply to the government, and let them convince them, like a kind of UNESCO World Heritage application, to show the value, to do the value interpretation, and to convince them to give it a protection status. So of course, you can find also some umbrella guiding values from the general superordinate law, which is the law of cultural heritage protection in China. it says that all institutions, organizations, and individuals have the obligation to protect cultural relics, and then the government should improve a kind of social participation mechanism, also to mobilize enthusiasm of the social forces and participation. They're all there, like very similar. And then particularly in these measures, it says that so that is a superordinate law, and then the Ministry of Culture in 2009 gave this executive order, and it says that cultural relics administrative departments at all levels shall organize and carry out cultural relics surveys regularly. This is the mainstream idea of defining heritage. And then as a kind of a supplementary to this top-down measure, and there's also this bottom-up measure, which the government is supposed to improve the system and encourage citizens, legal persons, and other organizations to play a role in the cultural relics survey, like a top-down and bottom-up, both there, like yin and yang. And then in Article 7, there are some like detailed registrations about how you can do if a citizen wants to do it, and then how you should do it. Anyway, we're going to skip all the details because later I'm going to show you a diagram about how it works. And then after these two levels of regulations, one is a national law, one is a Ministry of Culture order. And then in Beijing, we have a kind of a regional standards telling you in detail how you can actually implement this idea of allowing everyone to define heritage. So this is the implementation rules. And then there are certain detailed articles saying that if you want to apply, you need to bring your ID card, you need to go to the basic level, community level heritage bureaus, and you need to send in an application form, like UNESCO World Heritage. You should say, what I think the values are and why I think this building should be protected. And there should be a kind of, a consultation panel with experts, like a third party working for the government. And then this is how in detail it was designed. And then in this, I quote a little quotation from Mr. Liu Weidong, who is actually a member of the Beijing Cultural Relics Identification Committee. And he said that the idea of having this kind of rules is exactly to fill in the gaps, and then, to also, protect as much cultural heritage as we can, unless there are some, if in case there are something that are missing from the top-down regularly national surveys. So how does it work in general? I made a little animation. So bottom up. So we start from the bottom, citizen, legal person, or organization, every individual person. If they think that a building is of any kind of heritage value, that they could submit this immovable cultural relics identification application form to the basic level cultural heritage bureau, which is community level, like district level in Beijing, or county level, and then the local heritage bureau should consult an external experts committee, like a panel, like from like a university experts and professors. They will feedback to the government, telling their ideas whether this building is really of heritage values or not. And then with this result, ideally speaking, within 20 working days, the local level heritage bureau should give the answer back to the applicant, saying that we agree or no, we refuse to list the building, and because of what, okay? And at the same time, if it's a yes answer, then the district level heritage bureau is also obliged at the same time within 60 days to file the new listed heritage into the general archive to the superior level of heritage bureau, which is a municipal level, but because Beijing is the capital, so it's like provincial level heritage bureau. And it should also make it public on local media or on internet, on the official website of the government, telling the whole society that now, from this moment on, this building is also protected. Nobody can touch it or demolish it. And there's also a measure to say, what if there is a no answer? And if the local heritage bureau said, no, we don't agree with you, sorry, we don't think the building is of any protective values. And then the applicant, according to law, can also have one chance to apply for a so-called administrative reconsideration to a superior government, to the municipal level of government heritage bureau. And then the municipal heritage bureau will actually form a kind of arbitration team and then give the case back to the local level. So to rerun the whole evaluation process and to invite other experts and to see whether the building is really of heritage value or not. And now we're going to see lots of pictures. Okay. Okay. So what is the social context of the lawmaking? And the law was actually made at a very certain period when China just opened up its commercial real estate development and turned, all these urban lands into commercial uses. So the real estate developers actually demolished lots of buildings. We're talking about conflicts. You can see that was actually me standing on top of a roof and obviously being attacked by one of the people who's demolishing a 600-year-old timber structure temple. I was trying to film them, and then they came here to stop me. So that was really the moment when Beijing was facing the Olympics and demolishing everything. And then the government was trying to find a way to stop this kind of government operation and to give the people some right to actually to check and balance on whatever the heritage the real estate developers and the local communities are trying to do. And then between the year of 2013 and 2014, the first successful case for this bottom-up heritage application case was actually done by myself. And it was about a grand maison, a mansion, very close to the imperial city in the center of Beijing. And that was a, let's say, 18th century timber structure mansion with a beautiful hanging flower gate in the middle with frescoes and wooden carvings. And that was one of my university investigation work. And we discovered this. And by the time we saw it, already 1/3 of the mansion has been demolished for the construction of a primary school. As you can see from the map, they wanted to build a community center and they want to build a playground of the primary school. And most of the very beautiful garden site of the mansion has been demolished. So I wanted to save the house. Then I carried out historical investigation. I found a historical map of Beijing, which shows almost exactly the same general layout of the current situation of the mansions, which proved that at least the general layout of the house can still date back to mid-Qing dynasty. And then based on the spot investigation, we know that this is actually the former residence of a quite important figure there, whose name is Chen Baoshen, China's last emperor's tutor, the last imperial tutor of China. And then he's also a scholar, a calligrapher. And then based on massive archival research, we can see this was a newspaper report in the year of 1935 when Chen Baochen died. And then it says he lived, in a certain alleyway in Beijing. And then they changed the number, but you can trace back that was exactly the place where he lived. Some other evidence, and we can even reconstruct like a grand funeral in that year when he passed away, which was fully covered on the local newspaper, and it can be really reconstructed back into the local urban construct. So with all of these evidences, I filed a personal application, bottom-up application to the local heritage bureau, saying that I want this building to be protected. At the same time, I carried out, under the local help of local NGOs, public lectures. I gave presentations. I even joined the making of a documentary about how to save heritage. And then luckily, I was invited for lunch by the local mayor, who is accidentally alumnus of Peking University, who studied the history of law. So he gave me 1.5 hours during lunch to explain the value of the site. He understood. And then under his help, so my campaign became the first successful case after the publication of the law. So the building was listed. And during this campaign, there are lots of local media coverage. And then a writer from Singapore even learned about this. And then he transferred the mission to someone in America. And then the mission was, the information was turned back to Beijing. And then via all these kind of transmission, we learned that there are still some other offspring of another important family that also cohabited in this mansion. And then he contacted me and offered lots of historical photos and archives. So we really learned about how it was before. another interesting part is that during all this campaign, the local heritage bureau received a letter with over 20 signatories from the local community, people who are really living in this mansion, saying that we don't want this mansion to be listed as heritage. We want it to be demolished because we want the money from the government. We want to improve our living conditions. Please demolish it. And after they received this letter, you can see the beautiful hanging flower gate has been vandalized. The wooden, decorations were removed and they were destroyed. And the local, when it was exposed by local media, so the local heritage bureau even made a little cage temporarily to save the building because it has already been decided to be given a heritage status. But nevertheless, after waiting for 1 year, I received a yes answer, and then this became the first successful case. And then after this, in the past 10 years, there are more and more followers trying to use this law in China. For example, there are two persons, particularly one is called Wang Wei, a very young guy born after 1990s. And then he basically listed a lot of these historical modern railway systems in China into the heritage, which is still a domain that the local heritage bureaus don't really have the expertise in understanding. Modern heritage, industrial heritage, railways. So he is an expert in this, and he helped this evaluation. He helped this perception of heritage and to really give it into the heritage bureau. And then there's also another guy who is even, I think, almost 80 years old now, and then he's retired. And then he really walked into all these mountainous areas in Beijing, found lots of stupas and carvings, all these kind of things. And that has never been discovered by the government. This is my last slide. So conclusions. What about this China's citizen heritage identification application legislation? Okay, the fundamental value is, of course, about social participation in heritage conservation. The realistic motivation, there are 2 points I can think of. One is a kind of check and balance on government actions. They cannot do whatever they want. Now there's also bottom-up supervisions and decision makings, especially against the real estate related demolition. The second one is finding and fixing omissions and errors in the regular top-down cultural heritage survey system. The significance from the approach of critical heritage studies I can think of is that it could bring in individual perceptions of heritage values and narratives, and diversifying a kind of heritization path. However, from the approach of implementation, it is still not a kind of a mainstream approach. There are more and more participants with successful cases. The government's operation is getting more compliant with the law and also standardized, but still it's a kind of side choice. It's not the main thing. The shortcomings, as long as there is still application and approval, it is still a top-down authorized heritage discourse because there's still an authorization process. And also, the most important point is a successful application requires professional historical research, heritage evaluation. The procedure itself is very time, energy consuming. Therefore, capable applicants are still limited to educated elites. So it's not really about the people, let alone there are even residents who are willing the house to be demolished and trying to improve their living conditions. So these people's visions do not necessarily represent everyone from the local community. My last question for consideration. Heritization is an act of power. Defining heritage is a right to the control of identities and values. So in a late modern world, never shy of conflicting interests, historical experiences, and contemporary expectations, is it time for us to abandon this authorized heritage discourse and let everyone to define heritage? Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, we move to discussion. So how do we run this? How do we manage this?
Yes.
Of course. Thanks, Giora, for chairing this session. Dear colleagues, as we promised, still we have time for the discussion. As we have heard during the last presentation, we're living in a different realities, of course. China, in terms of population, is 3 times bigger than the whole Europe. Yeah, so must be totally different situation. Your questions, your comments, your instructions, yes. Because, dear colleagues, we represent a theory committee. It means that we should not only to present case studies, but we should also try to formulate some methodological attempts in order to describe the complexity of the problems we're rising in our case. So in our case, on the first level, of course, we should show the case studies, the examples, but it would be very useful if we would be able to formulate such a methodological attempts, how to organize in a proper way that discussion or the dialogue, yes? Of course, any case is totally different, but anyway, is it possible maybe to have that methodology which could be useful for more cases for our realities? Maybe there is no universal solution, of course, but some proposals could be expressed by us. Yeah. Your comments, please. Questions. Colleague, please introduce yourself.
UK. What you just said is very interesting because methodology can only come from practice. You can't have methodology in abstract sense. So examples are extremely relevant here.
As a starting point.
As a start.
And then?
And then you start examining your methodology, what you've done, to see is relevant. It becomes universal, could not become universal. So you start with the example, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
In the practical example.
Yes, as a starting point, and maybe it would be possible always when we are asking for the papers and also for the contributions and for the articles, we are encouraging colleagues, please close your contribution with some proposal or some conclusions. That's what I'm saying about. Please. We are not limited in terms of time now.
Well, in terms of methodology, trying to step back and look at things philosophically, and what did we say in the beginning? There are heritage experts, one group or entity, and then the others, the non-heritage specialists, stakeholders, and the community as a second entity. And actually, it seems that we are dealing with a conflict problematic situation, but maybe we can flip it and try to see the same situation from a positive opportunity angle, where there is a common ground where what we really want to do is effective heritage preservation. And maybe we can use the same material, the community and stakeholder situation material, and use it to the advantage of heritage preservation. So maybe we can position ourselves as community, not against community. Actually, we did say today, we are ourselves a community, and we are also citizens, and we have the same user rights. So we should perhaps harness the opportunity of not being a heritage expert, just being a regular citizen with more knowledge, with more awareness, and with more claims of value and attachment and all the semiotics, and see ourselves as responsible citizens with a mission to educate, really. So gather armies of informed citizens with us. So it's more of a missionary, maybe crusade kind of thing, but we take on the social role more and fix our shift our focus from this defensive and attack position of preserving knowledge and science, but more opening up the science into community. So it's, I think it's just a psychological flip of our situation. So some stream of consciousness for you there. I don't know if you can take it into a methodology, but that's my take on it.
Okay.
Does it make sense to you? Yes. Okay.
Other comments, proposals, questions? Yes, please.
I agree with colleague because I think it is better to look that way since we are always regarded as somebody who is against progress, against everybody else, and but we are beside it, we are professionals in preservation. We are also citizens and part of the society. So in that way, we are not opposed, but completely contrary. We are the ones who are just obliged to give information on the heritage, to educate people, to propose some measures, and I like that way of thinking, not to be against the other stakeholders, but to be regarded as well as stakeholders. And I just have one question for our colleague from Beijing. I don't know if I have understood correctly, but this is one way of recognizing heritage because it depends too much on the knowledge and may I say enthusiasm of one person or a group of persons. Perhaps some regular surveys would be better in case of recognizing the values of the heritage.
Yes. So I would answer.
Of course.
So yes, I explained that it's still not a mainstream approach. The mainstream approach in China is still very much top down. So the Heritage Bureau now I think they are doing the full nationwide heritage survey, and then which means every Heritage Bureau at every like really basic level, county level, district level, they will go outside to go, around the mountains to try to find ancient heritage sites. And there have been 4 rounds of this so far, all over the country. So this is still the main way to define heritage. And then on top of that, from the year of 2009, against the cultural the historical context of mass demolition, real estate developer destructions, and then they also opened a supplementary channel for everyone to say, I want this thing to be nominated. So it's a kind of counterbalance, but it's still not the mainstream path.
Thank you.
And then, please.
I have a question to everyone here. How many jobs are there in heritage? And is is it a growing field of study or a disappearing field of study? Because I happen to be at the University of Cambridge in the humanities, and we're struggling to get students into modern and medieval languages. So, because the issue here about the differences of hierarchy or coming bottom up or top down, the issue is what we're facing in the world. We have elected leaders that are absolute idiots, right? Because our public is not educated, because education is failing. So you might have an educated audience or community if heritage is somehow taught, or if you have, I feel like it does lie in education, a broader education, and right now the humanities are being cut and are struggling in university. So I'm not in heritage per se, but I'm just wondering, are the numbers growing in heritage? I would have to guess probably not. Are your jobs growing? I would have to guess probably not. So I think that there might be theoretical aspects, but we also have to deal with the reality of how to address these issues.
I am afraid that your question is very interesting, but we don't have enough time because each person, it would be different story about that. Each of us has totally different education experience and so on. So we have only one day left for the conference.
Think about education in general.
Yes, for sure, for sure, for sure.
All our issues.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. No doubt, no doubt. And because I don't know, we shouldn't open that discussion because it would be too complicated. Because of the complexity of the heritage protection, there is no one direction in the university heritage protection. People are educated in a different levels, which are useful for that. And then in the form of postgraduate study or practice, they are trying to complete their education. It's not possible to indicate that, for example, civil engineer or architect or archaeologist, this is the proper education. This is only the first step, the first level. And then in main countries, I guess they are postgraduate study plus experience to be part of that.
Is it rational to think that we could indicate a single methodology? No.
Of course not. Of course not.
Any methodological question that you come up with, in the time of war, if we could put up a covering over the church, that is, who cares, what anyone thinks, the church is under a cover, right? But if you live in the UK and, we pay parish taxes to maintain churches, and they have a history of thousands of years, the conversation is like apples and oranges.
Yes, absolutely right. But please remember that if we would like to be respected by the society must be convinced that we're representing particular discipline. There is particular discipline behind us. The economy, for example, is also so different as heritage protection, but there is the science, economy, and they are different methodologies as a part of economy. So if you are trying to make any proof, to deliver any proof, you are using your scientific tools. And if we would be acting without that platform as a science, we wouldn't be respected. Because as I showed in my presentation, there is no platform to compare the values. And our values, scientific value, artistic value, historic value, they are always weaker if there is battle with the developer, for example. Therefore, we should have that methodology, which should be at least a bit objective during the dialogue. No universal, but we have to do that. Lady and then Giora.
I think that's becoming a top-down discussion. I was referring to the presentation that I thought was excellent, really showing that it's a two-way dialogue and how important it is to get this two-way dialogue from people, citizens, stakeholders, they will enrich the experts' knowledge and vice versa. And talking about the United States, Jane Jacobs brought this up in the 60s, and we have an excellent example of this observation of High Line in New York, which is very much collaboration between stakeholders and authorities. So I think there are examples from a very long time ago about this way of dealing with respect for each other. I think that really brings a good solution.
A part of that ground under our feet, these are doctrinal documents. They are expressing the current state of art in our domain. Giora.
Well, following the previous comment on education, I would suggest that we recommend ICOMOS International to change the name and scope of the training committee to training and education. The education is so important. Training is for the professionals in the professional field, but education is different and ICOMOS is not dealing with it. Maybe it should become a scope of one of the scientific committees.
Of course, I will give you the example of potential actions which would be undertaken. Our committee, our colleagues, we were invited to have a meeting with colleagues from Cambridge, from England, to elaborate the doctrinal document regarding the protection of archaeological traces of Holocaust. They are expecting that it would be possible to elaborate a short document in which we could present the current opinion of the heritage specialists, how to protect. Of course, it would be not possible to describe all case studies, yes, but some rules which would be the ground under the feet in that case. Susanna.
I think something very important is the terminology and the different how do you say, in English, in Spanish, in Italian, because what we have seen, for example, what I think is that this is absolutely necessary because many words are completely different in one country and in other, and I think it's necessary, the terminology.
Okay, thanks. Calogero.
When we speak about the terminology for our hippomos, I remember the meeting in many years ago in Historic Review Restauro, and then when give me Professor De Angelis and Professor Petzet, and so please Calogero beginning the research in terminological approach in many languages in Europe. Now we published many books. The first edition arrived in Second War. Now we're preparing the second book from Second War today in different language. And the terminologica is very common basis. Without common basis, we have many misunderstandings. In an example, restoration. Restoration is clear, probably, but renewal is totally different. Refurbishment is totally different. But in many Anglo-Saxon countries, excuse me, Nigel, no, not for you, but in many countries, we use refurbishment or what is refurbishment? Or reinstate. Ecco, it's totally different from restoration or ochrona zabytków, or conservacja zabytków, no? For this is important the common basis, and then we can work for our future. No future without past, I remember. No can beginning day for day. Okay, excuse me.
Thanks a lot. Other questions, because our viewers are also waiting. Any other comments or questions? Yes, please, and then you. Michael, please.
Michael from the Philippines. So I just wanted to comment, first of all, from George's presentation this morning that it resonated very profoundly with me because conflict resolution, I believe, is intrinsic in heritage conservation. 12 years ago, 13 years ago, I took a master's degree in international conflict resolution because I wanted to apply it into heritage conservation. And talking about education, now I think there are a few courses, but back then, when Nigel was at, when Giora was asking me, was it a specific course on conflict resolution in heritage conservation? I said, no, there was no such thing back then. I had to make the connection myself in my research. And I proposed ethical guidelines to the World Heritage Site Inscription Project because precisely of the conflict. Another thing that I wanted to say is to the other comments that I teach at the University of the Philippines in the College of Architecture. I teach heritage conservation studies, and I teach my students that, as maybe all of you know here in your experience, there is nobody else we can rely on to resolve these conflicts because our clients cannot even pay us the right amount if we really think about it. they will not pay any extra money to get a mediator to talk between the stakeholders and us. So I teach my students just the basic formats, the basic forms of conflict management, how to talk, how to dialogue, how to immerse, how not to come off as we know more than them. Like they said, how to probably be a spy, not in a bad way, but just be part of the community and learn and get their trust. So I teach those basic principles in order for them to be able to hopefully get their points across and then get people to listen and maybe get people from an opposite side. But please just be open. And so another thing that lastly, I was also part of the technical working group which wrote the very first Philippine Heritage Charter. And I insisted that we included conflict resolution principles, ethical guidelines right in the charter itself already. Because as all of you know, we cannot do heritage conservation without first resolving the human conflict that threatens the heritage in the first place, right? The war is just maybe 5% of the problem. 95% of the problem is everyday human conflict over development, over tourism. Just one last note. While we were writing the charter, it was debated like we are now. It was debated very intensely that should it be scientifically based processes that should govern? And because that was the original language that we used, but there were several people who objected and said, but what if the person who knows more about the heritage side is not a scientific person, does not have a degree, does not have, you know, the credentials, but what if it's the person who's been living there as a caretaker for 50 years, and he or she knows everything there is to know how to preserve that particular site. So we changed the language to evidence-based. So long as it's evidence that's proven to work, whether it's from a scientific study or just 50 years of experience, and that apparently was the word that everybody agreed on.
Thanks a lot. Lady, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to give more information that I was like I said, technically agreed. I wanted to give the information about
A bit louder.
To be louder. Okay. There were some questions about the education and training. So I'm from CIV, and just to point out that this is the Scientific Committee for Education and Training. And the information is about two working groups. One working group is trying to trace different ways of teaching and different methodologies and actually different programs in different countries, how we teach young people conservation and restoration, specifically in architecture. Another working group is dealing with terminology. And what we have heard, there is years-long, decade-long problem with terminology between different regions and different countries. You know, for example, the shelter that we know is a covering above our roof, and in Arabic, shelter is a wall next to doors. So that working group is trying to make kind of a vocabulary, terminology terms in different languages and comparing it for all of us to be easier to understand in communication with people from different parts of the world. And at the end, I just would like to add that I believe that the communication is probably the most important in our job. And we have a lot of things to tell, to explain, but we usually just talk between ourselves, trying to find the best solution, and then we suggest what is, according to our opinion, a final solution for the site or just for the building. And it's important to have a communication in each level, in each step of our business and in our research, in our conclusions, with people who are stakeholders from different levels.
Okay, thanks. Now we pass the voice to our viewers online. Simone, please.
Okay. Just a moment. Okay, share on. Thank you very much.
Hank?
Thank you very much, Simone. My name is Henk van Schaik, and I am the Vice Chair, President of the International Scientific Committee on Water and Heritage. My question is about the pillars under cultural heritage, as so well formulated by Tamas, I think, the previous speaker and the initiator of the philosophy ISC, who said that the pillars are history, art, and science. And in connection with landscapes and the upkeep of landscapes, many World Heritage sites are landscapes, and I'm also referring to the presentation of Gauri Dixit. I would add to these three pillars livelihoods of local people. Thank you. That's my question. How do you think about that?
Whom you address that question?
I addressed the question to all of you, but in particular to the first speaker who talked about the three pillars, history, art, and research. How do you consider livelihoods in the landscape domain? And I'm talking about, for example, the Subak systems, Uifugao, etc. People are running away from, in particular, terraced mountainous areas because there is no livelihood, there is no income. But climate change is forcing upkeep. If not, then we get like, destruction because of rainfall, etc. So I think that livelihood for local communities, which is about income, to keep them in those places of World Heritage is very important. But I'd like to hear your views, and maybe it's a longer term discussion, which the ISC Water is actually, running or initiating, has initiated already since about 10 years. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Dear colleagues, again, I am absolutely convinced that that division between the heritage and monument is still very useful. It's still very useful. As you remember, at the very beginning of the 20th century, Belgian scientist Louis Cloquet proposed the division monuments into so-called living monuments and dead monuments. And still today, we have similar situation. I don't want to say that it is easy, but much easier is to protect churches which still are functioning as a churches with the same form, with a beautiful form, with the protection of substance, in comparison to the protection of hutongs in China. Yes, in hutongs, there are no living condition according to contemporary standards. So must be difference between the protection of the churches, which is still a living heritage, but in a different sense of that, in comparison to the hutongs in China showed us by our Chinese colleagues. So our methodology to protect those places must be different, but still, I'm absolutely convinced that those three values, historic, artistic, and scientific values, are still valid on the first level of analysis of those elements. Of course, additionally, we should add those aspects of a real life. But on the first level, we should analyze all monuments from that perspective. In the past, they were closing analysis on those levels. Nowadays, it is not possible. We have to continue, but it doesn't mean that we should avoid those level of analysis. Yes, that's the difference. Absolutely, we have to add those aspects as you mentioned, but not instead of those. But this is the addition element. Of course, as a result of that, our situation is much more complicated because those, remember, Nigel today shows William Morris. They were discussing mainly about the ruins. They were totally abandoned in the half of the 19th century. So the discussion was only how to cope with those totally dead monuments. It's only a small part of such monuments today. So we have to change our attitude. But it doesn't mean that the basic values for us for the analysis and our partners and other stakeholders, they couldn't not respect those values, but we have to collect the information about those values. That's not the end, the beginning of the process, but still important, it seems to us. So absolutely, I can confirm that you are right, that we should go farther, absolutely farther, but it doesn't mean that we have to lose our foundations. And that's the difference. Absolutely, you have right that we are also stakeholders, but these stakeholders, they were educated and they are responsible on behalf of the society for the protection of monument. As doctors are responsible for the health, as engineers are responsible for the safety bridges, yes? We are also responsible for keeping some values of the monuments.
Yeah, I agree with you that this is indeed a widening of the concept, and it's also site-specific, obviously, I think, or category-specific. For landscapes, it's different than for, say, like built and structures. It's a different story. But it's also essential if we are talking about partnership building with sectors, like, for example, water or land. It's essential that we also take the economic interests of the population, the local population, into account. So thank you very much. And I think the discussion on this point will obviously be continued through, the Venice Charter and all other doctrinal documents. Thank you.
We organized 25 conferences, and this is not the end.
I wish you a long life.
Yes.
Who is the next lady? Yes.
Giorgia Ranieri.
Yes, Georgia, please, the voice is yours.
Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for the possibility to ask some questions. And thanks to all the speakers who really enriched this afternoon with all their researches. I don't know if there's any background noise because I'm in a public place right now. And so I hope it will be clear. Okay, perfect. I'm happy to know that. And my question is actually addressed to all the speakers from today's session, and even related to what has been mentioned just some time before. In fact, it has been said that everyone has a different level of education. And this can be applied actually even to communities in general. So I wanted to know if anyone has defined in terms of methodologies, if it could be possible and how then to get something precious from every level of education. So how?
The easiest answer would be negative, of course. But do you have any? Sorry. We don't have any advices or Michael.
I don't know if this answers the question, but we recognize when we were writing the Philippine Heritage Charter, we recognize what a colleague from Cambridge said, and what all of you I know believe, that it starts from education and at a young age. Hopefully, we inculcate in our young people the value of our heritage. And so we made sure we wrote the whole principal chapter on education in the Philippine Heritage Charter. Quickly, I forgot, I made a mistake I mentioned this morning with Jura stuff, not Nigel. But I resonated with Nigel stuff as well this afternoon because we also have a problem with parish priests in the Philippines basically doing whatever they want with the churches during their watch. But I agree with the education, and he purposely wrote in the charter at the very earliest stages of primary education, and we made sure to include not just formal education, but informal education, madrasas for the Muslim population, for indigenous people. In other words, we made sure to cover all possible types of education from the earliest age. We put it in the charter because we believe it's the only way we can eventually, it will take maybe generations for it to take effect. But we had to put it in to make sure that everybody knows this is the only way we believe it's going to work.
Okay, dear colleagues, that was a long day. So if you agree, the last comment will be delivered by Michael, because still we have a coffee break and then the meeting of our committee, which is open for everybody. But Michael, your last comment, and we are be closing for today, if you agree on that. Yeah, Michael.
Me, you mean? Okay.
Sorry, Mikhail.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't quite understand, and that's a question for you. I don't really understand what the problem with the Pharaoh document is, and why we're actually discussing to somehow we've gone all over the place. I'm sorry, we've gone all over the place, and I don't really know what where we're going. And if I'm going back to what Gauri said about the stakeholders, talking about as an urban conservationist, this is the reality. A multitude of stakeholders is our reality. And I find that the only way we can make things work is by being professional, by basing our work on principles, on international principles, on documents. That's about it. We cannot really change the world where we're acting. This is the world that we are part of. And so I would like to understand more about, or if you could clarify, what is the problem that we're dealing with, really? Why are we talking today? I'm sorry.
Michael, may I ask you to read again call for our conference, and we return to that topic tomorrow?
I shall again. I read it, but I will reread it. Okay.
Please, we were trying to explain why we are dealing with that topic this year. And of course, we're ready for your disposal tomorrow. Dear colleagues, could you agree to close for today, because that was a long day?
Something?
Of course.
Yes, we're all talking of very different things with very different topics, and it's widely interesting, but we haven't agreed on anything. No, yes.
Who is responsible for that? I don't know. Our discipline is so complicated. More questions than answers. That's the reality. Dear colleagues, again, thank you very much to organizers. Thank you very much to the speakers, to the chairman of the sessions. Tomorrow we are going to meet at 9:30 sharp. We have to start. Now we have a coffee break. Half an hour, a quarter before 5, we are going to meet again, the members of the committee, but also other colleagues, because the meeting is open. Any other announcement? Not. No. Thanks a lot for your patience today, and coffee downstairs and welcome. Thanks a lot.